Beverly.
Good evening. As a resident and a tax-paying citizen of this town, I want to make my opinion very clear. I am of the opinion that this board needs to call for a moratorium on all warehouses that have not, as of today, broken ground, started construction. The push by the projects to the planning board, whom you're supposed to protect, has caused them to be so overwhelmed that they've actually broken the law. On Monday, January 27th, at the town planning board meeting, Chairman Michael was so frustrated with an applicant, and they're not getting the required documents to them in timely fashion. They got the documents just 2 hours before the meeting. He called for a 5-minute recess, not going into executive session, not following protocol, but simply called for a 5-minute recess. They all left the area. They went out in the hallway and had private conversations. That was the entire board, the attorneys, the applicant, and the applicant's attorneys, away from the public. That's a violation of the open meetings law, clearly. And it is on video. It has been sent to the proper authorities, including Senator Scopus. There is also work going on, I don't know if you know it, at the Galaxy project down on Barron Road. That site's nowhere near approved. Endangered species are being left dead on the road. And there is video evidence of this as well. We have a building department and inspector that is so understaffed and overworked that these occurrences are soon going to become the norm instead of anomalies. There are documented instances where work on projects has progressed even without the proper documentation, AKA Alicia Holdings. But the building inspector just said, in effect, don't operate that until you get your building permit. That's illegal too. All of these acts are illegal, and you, board, have the power and authority to correct them. You can call for a moratorium on any and all warehouse projects that are not under construction as of today. Every one of you have a choice to make. Will it be one that follows the road to a legacy of decency and law-abiding government, or one that allows for a different outcome? Let me end with a quote from Robert Bolt. When a man takes an oath, he's holding his own self in his own hands like water. And if he opens his fingers, then he need not hope to find himself again. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Nick?
Good evening. I'd like to applaud Denise on that well-articulated speech, and you know, I don't think that through this whole process that the board has heard a lot from landowners. I am also a large landowner, and I have conversations with several other farmers who are large landowners, and we all share that similar story and opinion. You know, as a large landowner, that is the most valuable asset that we have. And I've heard the comment several times that, you know, a majority of people, you know, want these pieces maybe preserved or not to be developed. But I would say that, you know, as a larger landowner and business owners, we are of course the majority. So our rights are to have that land, that value, and those zonings that we bought the property with. And as you know, Americans, we don't feel that anybody should be dictating to us, you know, the right to what we should be doing with our property. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else? Yes, Barbara.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak. I hope this has an impact on you. Realtors, developers, and economic development agencies all have the same mantra: location, location, location. There's no doubt that the town of Montgomery is an excellent location for massive warehouses. There are 2 exits that lead from the interstate directly into and through our town. However, this mantra also applies to every other industry. It's necessary to boost tourism, so people will take this exit instead of going to the next. It's needed for retail, for both shoppers and for products. It's necessary to the clients and employees of professional offices and medical centers. And it's important to manufacturing, for delivery of raw material and for shipping of finished goods. The one difference all of these brick and mortar places have is the economic value. The value for an office complex, retail marketplace, lodging, gallery, or just about anything else is assessed at a greater amount per square foot than that of a warehouse. So the assessed property and school taxes return a higher amount per square foot. In other words, a smaller building with far less impact would return the same or greater amount in property and school tax. And for the most part, these industries also pay a living wage for the town, county, and region, while having a lesser negative impact and resulting cost on natural resources. Our region is home to 4 of the most prestigious stage, scenery, and lighting houses, art and other fabricators, countless museums. We have wonderful parks and restaurants. All of these industries require good access to major roadways in order to succeed. There's a synergy that grows strong when similar industries band together. Polish Talix moved back into our building because of the synergy they share with Frank Stella. Artists seek out other artists for inspiration. Fabricators join with other fabricators. Professional offices, legal and accounting, architectural, engineering, and environmental services all succeed when their expertise grows with other related industries. Restaurants do better when they're closer to other restaurants. Retail markets become retail marketplaces. With lodging, this will also draw some of the $5 billion spent in the Hudson Valley every year directly to Montgomery. Even at just 5% of this amount of $5 billion, this is $12.5 million a year that would go directly into the local economy. This is a direct dollar impact, not a possible spinoff. It is real money spent, real sales tax and lodging tax collected, and every one of these industries relies on the services provided by the others. Imagine the added benefit if people took the exits from Montgomery off 84 or the Thruway to 84 instead of the ones for Newburgh and their waterfront, or New Windsor, or traveling north to Gardner, New Paltz, and Woodstock. When the first thing you see is warehousing, it leaves no desire to come and explore all of the wonderful things we have to offer. The next exit is only 10 minutes away. Warehousing offers none of the synergistic benefits. The spin-off benefits are largely for gas, coffee, and fast food. They are standalone entities unto themselves. They consume land with buildings that have a lower assessed value per square foot than other industries. They contribute to far greater constant noise, increased traffic, increased accidents, increased wear and tear on our roadways, decreased air quality. They increase impervious surface, often resulting in poor quality stormwater runoff that might even contaminate our water supply. The jobs offered are all too often below a livable wage, and a greater percentage of these employees will need the help of public assistance, which results in a direct cost to our county. We should not let realtors or economic development agencies be the arbiters for our future. Their interests are satisfying the needs of their clients. It doesn't matter that home values drop in areas around warehouses or that these homes are often also the residents' greatest asset. The town's history and sense of community identity has no intrinsic value to them. These warehouse projects determine the permanent future identity of Montgomery. Implementing a comprehensive moratorium for warehousing only will ensure that we have a voice in our future. Allowing these projects to move to the approval stage is counterintuitive to the moratorium proposed by the town board. This will defeat the purpose of a new master plan and updated zoning that will guide the town of Montgomery toward the future. It is akin to closing the barn door after the horses have escaped to the pasture. The moratorium can allow for a case-by-case exemption. Infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, water supply, and enough personnel to monitor these projects must be in place before these projects are given the green light to move forward. Let the applicants apply for an exemption. Allow this process to proceed in a fair and orderly manner. It's time to stop and think about the future for the next generation, for our children and our grandchildren. This will be the legacy that you leave to the next generation. Will it be a place they can live and work, or will it offer them nothing but a memory of what used to be? It's time we replace the mantra of location, location, location with economic diversification, environmental preservation, and community unification. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, thank you all. We're gonna start with our first old business item, and this is our updated draft of our moratorium law. Did everyone get a chance to really get a good look at this? I know there was also an email sent over by Stephanie who actually laid out some of the items that we brought up, some of the concerns that we had in terms of length of agreement, in terms of geographical spotting of certain areas and exempting them, and some of the concerns they had that Stephanie had there. Does anyone have any questions about some of those items that we brought up? Or anything specific in the draft? Just to reiterate, we were drafting a 6-month moratorium, and this would have all warehouses and distribution facilities. Through our discussions, we have gotten past the 100,000 square foot threshold, and it includes all. Is that an area that you guys want to discuss?
Yeah, I think we'll need to revisit that.
Sure.
That's fine. I think we need to revisit that a little bit, even if it's not 100,000 square foot, but we can come up to some kind of agreement.
Is there a specific reason why you mentioned that?
Because if somebody just wants to build a small shop, say, and call it a warehouse, it's gonna be, like, if it's carried on with another business, you know.
So in part of this law, it speaks to add-ons. So what you're saying is if you had an existing business and they wanted to add on a 10,000 square foot, you know, retrofit something.
It would be called the warehouse, but maybe it's a storage place for
Right.
them, or.
And as opposed to them
something
going
like
through
that.
the exemption
Right.
process that we have in this law, you're saying we should change the threshold so that they don't go through that process and they're just exempt entirely.
Right.
Does anyone else agree with that?
Why would we change but isn't that why we have the process to ask them to say that they could do a waiver and show that it is creating hardship on their business, if that's what they need by your storage that you're claiming?
Will, to clarify
yeah.
that point, is that,
Any applicant can come before the board, assuming the moratorium passes, seeking a hardship exemption if they meet the criteria that's in here. Right now, the draft as it's written, non-final draft, but as it's written, it speaks to warehouses and distribution centers either as the primary or accessory use on a piece of property. So the board needs to decide, as Councilwoman Melick raised, the board needs to decide how they want to proceed, whether they wanna consider that. If someone is storing for their own use, for their business, that doesn't necessarily qualify as a warehouse or a distribution center.
Right.
Because we have the definition of warehouse and definition of distribution center are in the law, the proposed law, the land use approvals, that's in there. Definition of warehouse tracks the current code section 30-20, which just happen to have here.
Yeah, but if they wanna
Right.
add on a couple garage doors or something for even their own warehouse use, or even if a new business is coming into the area and they wanna put a small warehouse up affiliated with their, business. I mean, I just think it's another loop that they would have to go through that they shouldn't have to go through. I mean, we can put some kind of the size.
I
But
think
we
the-
didn't want the size because isn't that what the planning board said? The
So
planning
it
board was
wasn't,
concerned
it wasn't
about
necessarily just the planning board.
size.
I think it was, the basis of the conversation was at 100,000, right? And and we identified during the planning process that there was, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000
Right.
square foot warehouses that potentially could be closer to residential areas, which is what the intent was. So what Sherry's saying is something entirely different. I think she's saying an existing business that maybe wants to warehouse some of their goods to be sold, is that what we intend to put a stop to? And I think what she's saying is that's not her intention, that's not
Right.
something she would want to even have to go through the waiver process.
Right, to go through I mean, there's such a process they have to go through to begin with. Why would you need to put that extra process?
So I think what you're saying is you would wanna lower that threshold from 100,000 to
Right.
maybe 50.
50,
And then that would help the little guys,
As
is
an
what you're saying.
accessory use.
As an accessory use.
Is that what you're referring to?
no, but even if they want to start a new business or
Well, that's-
whatever, I mean.
But that's
You
That's
know,
the
like
board
you're-
discussion.
That now you're changing it to, you're allowing a warehouse distribution center, which is what we need to take a break on for a little while and develop the plan, the comprehensive plan, and update the zoning to say, okay, if they wanna come in, great, let's welcome them, but let's try to steer them in a direction that we can welcome them and they can use our water and sewer and they can be in the correct place away from other areas, but we need to use time now to move forward on our comprehensive plan committee and look at the zoning.
I think
What
we
do
did-
you guys think?
I think we did start out, sorry, Mom.
No, go ahead.
We did start out at size, we did say 100,000, then it
And then the planning board.
ended up here, so.
Yeah, and I thought if somebody wanted to build a furniture store, sell furniture, like Evan Walden,
Yeah,
a 20,000 square foot furniture store which has showrooms and then you have a 10,000 square foot in the back where they have trucks dropping in and they have storage and they sell their product out of, that's new construction, is that a warehouse? Now, you said primary, the word you used, well, I think it was primary, well, the primary purpose of that particular building is to have a furniture store.
Well, right now,
But
the
you
more.
have 10 bins coming in the back and they drop off furniture or whatever they drop off and pick up and store it there. That's kind of like a warehouse. I
Right
don't
now,
think that should be part of this program.
That's up to the board. I mean, right now, accessory uses
Will that come
are
under,
included.
the way it's written, would that become under, we couldn't do that, they couldn't do that?
he just said yes, it's included.
Right.
It's included right
Yes.
now as an accessory uses as well. That's something the board needs to.
So I heard you make a comment, I just wanna be clear on it. You said we could potentially, put a limit on accessory use at a certain threshold. Is that something that you said we could,
But not
as
the
an
primary
accessory use, but
So
not
the
primary?
primary use of warehousing would be
Still under the,
excluded,
no
under
square
the-
footage, correct. But
Right.
this would be an accessory use, which is a point,
How about an accessory use to an existing business?
I mean, that's.
I don't agree with that.
I mean,
Suppose somebody wants
Well,
to
wouldn't
do
that be,
business.
well, then,
the same thing.
that goes into what we're trying to do now. I mean, if
Well, I
it's a
don't
new
wanna make
business,
them
we
have to
need
go
to make
through
sure
that
that we have
extra
time to
work.
establish that the comprehensive plan is doing its job and the zoning is doing its job.
Well, it's
Alright.
gonna
If
be
we're gonna
in-
say
Hold on,
that
hold on,
existing
hold on. Sure,
businesses,
sure.
they should be able to do business, and I can compromise with existing businesses getting a waiver on
written application.
Well, there is a process for them
There is a
to
process.
state that they would like a business.
But
With all of everything else that they have to go through, I mean, I just don't feel they should have to go through this too for a small business, you know? Whether it be any business, a new or existing.
We have laws in place, such as the seeker process, to ensure that and I don't mean to get off topic, but if you're saying about the hoops that people have to jump through, we have laws in place to protect our residents, whether that's the adjacent residents, the residents down the road, but it's laws that our planning board has to follow by and our zoning board to make sure that developments get installed correctly.
Exactly.
So to me, it doesn't matter if that process takes 6 months or takes 2 years, they're doing their job.
So I think when it matters is when you get the reputation as a community that isn't friendly to business. And I think that's the point that they're trying to make, to respect to what you just said. I think it matters. The length of time can absolutely matter, because time is money. I mean, all those things, they matter.
Well,
Everything
what's
does.
your definition of an extraordinary hardship? Who's gonna make that
That's
determination?
us.
Us.
We do. It-
We decide what extraordinary hardship and what's regular hardship.
And that's why it's written like that. It gives us flexibility to make a decision
So-
based on a number of factors.
what we have in here is what it's not, which gives the board some more flexibility. What it's not is coming before the board and saying, well, I'm concerned that you're gonna change the zoning. That's not an extreme hardship. Looking at 7A.
Real quick, Will, can I give just a succinct example,
Go ahead.
right? So an extreme hardship could be, like you just said, a furniture store needs to stop its traveling and cut its costs, and it wants to invest in a space that it can just take its stuff and distribute it. That's a hardship. That would be a significant hardship. You could bring that to the board, and we could say, listen, this is not what we meant not in our intent for this law to stop this business, so you can go through the planning process. And this is a pretty, I mean.
Do we have to have a public hearing on that, or?
No, it's basically just, it has a timetable. We have up to 45 days up here, and then, up to 5 days written notice.
There is a public hearing.
There is a public hearing?
Right, as it's written right now.
As written right now?
So the public hearing is gonna determine if it's an extraordinary hardship or just a regular
No,
hardship.
we would.
That would be part of the discussion.
Right, the public hearing is just for the public and for interested parties to have an opportunity to raise their concerns. We still make the determination. But we can choose not to have a public hearing as part of the exemption or the hardship policy. That's something we can remove.
Yeah, because ultimately, the public hearing is just an option to hear the public's concerns about this said
Which we already do
hardship, but we
every
do,
meeting.
right.
So,
I mean, I'm not trying to limit it, but
No, but
I mean,
it-
if that's what the timetable is concerned about. then
if the compromise is lessening the timetable and lessening what the hoop is, I think that's a good compromise. And I think in a moratorium law, the best place to hit, either it's a geographical issue, like issues on Ellicott Road, or size, or an extension, the hardship clause is what we should clean up and go through that process. Go ahead.
I don't recommend taking out the public hearing component of it.
Okay.
Shorten the time frame.
Okay.
But the point of, you can pass a moratorium on warehouses and distribution, and you have a hardship mechanism, which you need to have to sustain the law. The point of it is, if there's going to be a hardship application,
Okay, I
there
hear you.
needs to be notice to the public. Shorten the time frame, get it done quickly, but taking out the public hearing component, I would not recommend.
Hey,
So
Tom.
it doesn't have a time frame on the length of time it needs to be set forward. So you can set a public hearing. Is there a general law that says you have to set it after a certain number of days? and
Public
note it?
hearing, it's gotta
10
be
days?
5 days.
5 days, right.
Right.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just real quick, is this typical hardship law that's written here, is this what other moratoriums, like, is this just standard language that other moratoriums have that did not look at the other ones that you sent us?
Yeah, I mean, there's some variation in it, but it's generally what most of them look like.
Thank you.
All right, I'm hearing some concerns. Let's take a look at our hardship, section 7, okay? We have the public hearing in here, but from how I'm reading it, we have a lot of flexibility in terms of getting the whole process done in a matter of even as soon as 10 days or 2 weeks. Is that, am I reading that correctly, Will? Is that, it goes up to 45 days, it could be extended longer, but we can also get it done quicker.
If the board wanted to push it, absolutely,
Right, so.
absolutely.
So Sherry, to your point, if you have a concern about this being an additional issue, instead of changing the law, we could go through the hardship process and it could be done within 2 weeks. So it's not,
It's just another step that they have to take.
I understand that. I
Building a
understand.
building when we could put a size on somebody that's a single business wanting to do a small, warehouse affiliated with a business that they gotta go through.
I'm not necessarily worried about the specific case. I'm worried about the unintended consequences that maybe I'm not thinking of right now that would allow for other opportunities to arise if we create a threshold. Does that make sense? Anybody else have an issue with the square footage or? Basically, my point is we have the hardship clause and it allows us an opportunity and the landowner an opportunity and the business an opportunity to plead their case in a really not insurmountable way, the way it's written, for us to allow them to just continue to go through the planning process. The way this is written seems fair to me. I don't know, I mean, that's just, it catches everything, in my opinion. Geography, the specific zone, every issue or concern we have, this seems to catch it. And we can always, you know, if we decide to set a public hearing and we hear some really good testimony from the public, we wanna change it, we can always edit it after the fact if we get some more feedback and some good points brought in. So it's not like we have to make the final decision today, we're just shoring this up and hearing any last concerns.
Right, because wasn't that the point, that we were trying to clean it up so that way we could do a public hearing?
Yeah, we wanna make this available to the public, they're eager to get it and provide their feedback, well, I'm eager to get it today.
Before we open the public hearing,
Yeah.
I think we should stick to our protocol and give this to our planning board for their opinions.
Before we have a final draft form?
Just in case we are missing something and they see something, we've always, before we open a public hearing, we always give them the opportunity to,
Send their
give us
comments.
their comments.
Did we though? Because
Yeah.
I thought
So-
that we had comments from Fred Rinkle.
So what we did is when Will was drafting the original law,
Okay,
they were brought into the conversation for that reason, to get ahead of it, so that we could move, you know, efficiently. But they have not yet seen this version. And I think what Cindy is saying is, before we set a public hearing, you'd wanna actually have them have discussion on this version. And then after we got their feedback, at maybe the meeting in February, we would then set a public hearing for the meeting in March. Is that what you're
I would say
suggesting?
if we ask them to have their public comments back to us by our next meeting.
By the 20th of February.
We could still set that public hearing for March.
For March, which is 2 weeks difference.
could we ask, because I think, don't they have a meeting on Monday?
Yes.
So if they have a meeting on Monday, wouldn't they be able to discuss it amongst themselves and get their comments to us if we have the open hearing on our next meeting?
We probably will have to call another special meeting to make the formal motion on the firm and on the committee anyway. So we may have another opportunity after Monday to make a motion to set a public hearing. So we'll have other opportunities, if that's your question, to do it
Okay,
earlier.
can we ask them to review this at their next meeting to move the process along so that way we can discuss it at a special meeting next week?
I mean, we can do whatever we want, right?
We already have a special meeting set up for next week anyway.
Yeah, so-
We're gonna have a board meeting
It's
twice
not a
week
notice
now?
meeting.
So it's not a notice meeting, we can't take action at that meeting. So we can't take action there.
Thank you.
Well, that's what he's saying.
Right, but what I was saying earlier, and what we have not established yet, is at some point tonight, this evening, in executive session, we're gonna be making some final decisions on our comp plan committee and on our firm. And we had discussed internally setting a special meeting just for the purpose of making those appointments, so that I could have time, a couple of days' time, to notify them, so they don't just find out on social media or from people who attended the meeting, if we made a motion this evening. So we could also use that as an opportunity to say the planning board could have it done by next Thursday, or whatever date it is that we do that. Or we can wait until the 20th. It's a couple of days difference, so it's up to you guys.
I mean, I'd like to give them to the 20th, if they have their comments back to us before the 20th, so that we can make a decision on the 20th for the public hearing.
And just to make a point, this isn't just coming from Councilwoman Voss, that the planning board did request this too. So that is something to
Yeah,
consider.
we always do.
So it's, I think it's okay.
Can we just go back to Can we go back to a word specific again? Now, if you have a 20,000 square foot furniture store with 5,000 square feet of storage space for a warehouse, that's gonna come under this law?
At the moment,
I got a problem with that.
All right, but Ron, let me ask you this question.
I know they can go, see if it's a hardship.
In a matter of 3 weeks, they could just be back in the planning process.
Yeah.
Why should they have to go through that though?
I understand, I understand, but it's not an insurmountable, it's very fairly written, the hardship clause, I think. It's not, I don't know, that's just my opinion. It covers everything.
If you're in the zoning for it to be done, they should be allowed to do it.
Well, that's the point of this, yeah.
That's why
So
we're
that's what we're talking
updating
about.
the
We either,
zone and the comprehensive plan. That's exactly why we're doing it. That's why we're in this process.
the problem with identifying one hardship and not having them under the hardship section would be, that's just one. I mean, we're gonna run into 100, you know what I mean? Not really 100, but a lot. So we're either gonna do this or we're not, is what I would
I
say.
think that it should be like 50,000 square foot.
Okay.
That's a
Small.
lot. You add a 50,000 square foot warehouse or accessory structure onto an existing building, how much impervious area are you looking at between all the parking spaces and all the rooftops and everything else? I would say I suggest we leave it how it is and send it to the planning board and see their comments. And then look for a public hearing shortly after.
So then if we decide to change it on the 20th,
Yeah,
can it still be done and then go to?
As long as we don't open the public hearing and make major changes after we've opened the public hearing.
so we can, to
don't
see,
forget, this also has to be referred to Orange County Plan.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to make it,
Before
there's no
the
secret involved with a moratorium, but it has to go to Orange County Planning, and they have 30 days to get back to the town board.
So we can send this to the planning board for their comments and still have the flexibility to make the changes that you still might wanna make. So we don't necessarily have to make that decision tonight if we're going to send it to the planning board to get their feedback by the 20th. On the 20th, we could then make our decisions, final decisions before it's in draft form, and we set our public hearing.
So, well, I have a procedural question. I mean, we're gonna have the public hearing open. There's gonna be substantial comments from the public. After the public hearing is closed, can we then make changes prior to sending it to planning, or is that?
If there are
Can't make major
substantial, if
changes.
there are
That's
substantial,
I'm sorry, I can't hear Will speaking. Wow.
depending upon what happens at the public hearing and any other comments received or comments from the county or comments from the town planning board, if there are significant changes made to the draft that was the subject of the first public hearing, there would need to be a second public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted
If
to know
they're
procedurally.
If they're minor changes, a word here or there, it's one thing, but if we're changing wholesale, some sections of it, that's gonna trigger the need for another public hearing.
All right. Another point that I wanna hit on is the timeframe in the planning process that we would wanna identify in terms of what falls in to this moratorium law. So at what point during the planning process do we wanna identify? That's something we discussed last time, but we didn't come to a consensus. It's a pretty big point.
I think that also should be answered somewhat by the planning board.
So you wanna ask the planning board to provide their
Their
feedback on that
opinion.
issue as well?
Their opinion, yeah.
I'm comfortable with that as a starting point.
It's currently covered in section 5.
Correct. And we would
Thank you. I was
wanna
wondering
see if the
when that
planning
was.
board thought that was an appropriate spot, or if there was other suggested recommendations they had. Do we wanna give them our feedback if there's anything that's different, or is that something we wanna ask them to give us some direction on?
Just ask their opinion, that's what we're asking them for on the other one, right? See what they think, what they wanna come back to us with.
Okay, is there anything you wanna?
I know that I talked to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know that I spoke with, Sue Haddon the other day, and she said she is getting more and more flooded with applications. So that will be a very, very important part as to where these projects are frozen in the queue, because, a lot of developers now are knowing, everybody knows that we're looking at this and that we're trying to develop this. So I think the planning board's stance on it would be a very important comment to make.
Okay. So unless there's any drastic changes we wanna make before we send it to the planning board for their thoughts to give us their feedback by the 20th, do we wanna move on, or are we still discussing some of these sections before we send it to the planning board for their comments?
According to this,
Which section are you at, Sheriff?
5,
the same much.
yeah. They have to
Any
be,
warehouse or distribution center, that's what it says.
they have to have had their final approval, suppose they're
That's why,
February.
that's why I brought it up.
We would need to know that date.
Right, that's what I'm saying, this is the one section where I think we probably could provide
So
some
if
guidance.
they're like 3/4 of the way through now, they're done.
This is, the way this is worded, I don't think is acceptable, and I'm not quite sure that's where we stand. The point is, do we wanna give them some feedback, the planning board, by changing it now and sending them a newer draft? Or do we want to keep it as is and ask them to give us some guidance? I think that's the question. Because I do think this needs to be changed, I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
So, do we wanna send it to the planning board, or do we
To
wanna
ask
give,
them at what point do they think that.
would they recommend to us?
Right.
And then we could either say, no, we disagree, or we agree.
Well, if I may, if the majority of this board at the moment feels that the language should be changed.
Yeah.
It would probably expedite things to.
Yeah, but they know better, like, how far into it.
Well, they'll know how many projects, right? They'll be able to more easily than us say, this will affect this many projects, and this will affect this many projects, and that certainly is.
Their secrets accepted and stuff,
Yeah.
I think, you know.
That was part of the list that I gave you guys at the last meeting.
Yeah.
That stated where all the projects are that are in front of them up to a certain date. One of the town residents also put it together, and stated where they're at, so if we had that information, we could have made our own decision on that.
So do we ask them if the draft environmental impact statement is a good stopping point, or do we
That's
just
the
leave it
whole,
to them?
that's the whole point of this. We could give them, we could change this, we could give them guidance. If we had a consensus now, we could say, hey, this is where we feel it could go. What do you guys think? Or we could just give it to them and say, what do you recommend? And then have our conversation start there.
What is the law? What is in the moratorium law? Well, is there special, statements in there as to when the process would stop at all, or is that all subject to the town board's decision?
Town board's decision.
All right. So do you want to give any feedback to the planning board prior to us giving them this law in this section?
Do we want to ask them if the draft environmental impact statement would be a good stopping point? What's their opinion?
The exception of that, right?
So you're saying to ask the planning board if they think any project that has submitted their draft environmental impact statement is a good starting point? Because that's what you're asking.
Submitted
They would
or?
no, submitted or.
I'm asking.
Or accepted.
I'm asking you guys.
Let's ask them.
Ask the
Ask
planning
them.
board.
I think it's
All right.
important.
We're gonna punt that for this meeting. We will get the feedback from our planning board, and by the 20th, we'll also be able to determine, based on their feedback, how many businesses that would affect and how many developments that would affect anyway, and what that impact would be. All right? Anything else before we move on?
Just
Will?
wanna say that
Yeah.
They're gonna give us our feedback, and then we gotta value what their feedback is.
Correct.
And just a point of clarification, DEIS is only on POSDEC projects.
Right, it'd be the.
Projects where there's a positive declaration of an environmental impact. So I think that also needs to be discussed, because it could be on projects that are negatively declared.
Correct.
That's still absolutely an issue.
Correct, and those that get an EAF, I agree, all that needs to get figured out, which is why I think the planning board feedback will be important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, before we move on, just so I'm clear, so the latest version, the red line that we sent last week, I'm gonna just have that document clean, accept those changes, or any of the other changes that we made, anything needs to be discussed, or all those good?
No, the changes you made
Okay,
look
so-
good. Does anyone have any issues with the current version, sending it to the planning board, is what he's asking?
After I clean, accept all the changes in the document and send it over to the planning board?
Correct.
Okay.
And so for the public's knowledge, that would get us on potentially to a point by the 20th to potentially set a public hearing and have this document available for more feedback.
And I appreciated the red line changes, by the way. I
Yeah.
liked the procedurally how that was done, cause then I can see where the changes were made.
Yeah, that's what,
Good job, Will.
alright, so, I got it.
Okay, thank you for our friends from the Walden Savings Bank for being patient. We're gonna move on to our potential zoning change of Ned Law property. This is something that, just for everybody's knowledge, was petitioned, last year or earlier, so this is something that, the town really kind of talked to Walden Savings Bank about this and made recommendations. So not necessarily this board, but previous board asked them to consider this as a zoning change. So I would love to hear from you guys there. Derek Weinkoop.
Brian,
Yes.
before they start.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
gonna
go ahead.
abstain from this process.
Cindy is an employee of Walden Savings Bank, so she is going to abstain from the conversation. Yeah.
Mr. Supervisor, I will note for the record in public that I do some work for Walden Savings Bank in the commercial loan department.
Okay.
So, we will need to discuss that as a board, how we're going to proceed with that, whether there's gonna be any issue with it. There are other applicants involved here, but I know the primary applicant is Walden, so.
Thank you for disclosing that.
wanted to-
What type of work is
I'm
it?
not general counsel to the bank.
Okay, I was just gonna ask.
No, I'm not general counsel to the bank.
It's more just,
I work with their commercial loan department.
okay,
On various projects.
okay. Thank you for disclosing that, Will.
Okay.
Go ahead, Derek.
Hello, Derek Weinkoop, President and CEO of Walden Savings Bank, and also, I believe on the agenda, it's Ned Law Corporation that actually has filed the petition for zoning change. A little fun fact, Ned Law is Walden spelled backwards. And in 1986, when the bank acquired the property at Scott's Corners, we did it in the name of Ned Law. So I'm also the CEO of Ned Law. I'm also accompanied by the chairman of Ned Law, Jeffrey Christ, who has also been on Ned Law and the bank's board for 27 years. So a little bit of level setting before I get to our specific requests. Again, the bank in the name of Ned Law acquired approximately 35 acres of property around 1986 at Scott's Corners. The zoning at the time was OP, Office Park, when acquired. Our bank had our headquarters in the village of Walden for 124 years and felt being around Scott's Corners, closer to the 84 corridor, closer to all the anticipated growth at I-84, made a lot of sense. Then, fast forward to 2002, that is exactly what we did. We built our headquarters there, we built our branch. There is a law office of our primary law firm, Johnson and Foley and Sirigliano, there, over 80 people, and we've been there for 18 years. Also around the time when we started the construction of the headquarters in 2002 and 3 time frame, we also provided some acreage to the Chamber of Commerce of Orange County, and they sit in the building behind us till about 2 years ago, where now the Girl Scouts part of the Hudson Valley are there. We also, just last bit of level setting here, about 6 years ago, the section around Old 208 that Don Whitfield owned, we acquired about 1 acre to 2 acres of property there. We thought that if a potential buyer saw that there was maybe another way to get into Scott's Corners from behind, that would be something that would be a benefit to a future sale. We also helped remedy a very awkward angle. Old 208 came out at an awkward angle, and we fixed a site impediment there. So what is left today, after we took about 8 acres of the campus, is about 25 acres behind us. And it is still that initial zoning that we had back in 1986 of OP, that is what we still have today. And we all know what's happened with office parks over the past 10 to 15 years. Folks are telecommuting, industry is going digital, and the need for offices is greatly diminished. This is not just a local demographic happening here in the town of Montgomery, it's happening everywhere. Ned Law, or Walden Savings Bank, in our petition feels the B4 zoning provides us with more opportunity to market our property and provide the town with attractive future rateables. We've been carrying it for nearly 35 years and have no reasonable offers despite listing it consistently over these last 35 years. We've consistently lowered the price, and currently it's listed at really what just our cost basis is. Furthermore, our bank regulators, the Office of Comptroller of Currency, don't look favorably upon banks simply holding property for future development. We're not in the development business, so they are also wanting us to try to actively market the property. So this potential use of B4, you know, a lot of people ask me, well, what more is allowed? And I'll give you just two examples. Perhaps a catering hall up at the top of the hill. If you haven't been on the property, is the absolutely, maybe prejudiced, most beautiful piece of property in the town of Montgomery. You can see the Shawangunk Mountains, you can see Mount Beacon, you can see Warwick, you can see Winding Hills. It's absolutely beautiful. How wonderful would a place like an Anthony's, Villa Venezia, Spruce Lodge, you know, none of them have approached me, but again, that type of facility would be amazing. Or say a medical facility like at Cornerstone or a New Horizons, Walkie Valley Health Center, Crystal Run. So the B4 zoning has more options, and again, the kind of very restrictive OP zoning is just really, we've gone nowhere fast these last 35 years. And again, if granted, we, Walden Savings Bank, we have nearly 150-year brand. We are going to be very stringent in who we sell the property to. We want it to be a use that is conducive to our brand and the bank position that we've had for almost 150 years in this community. So in conclusion, we humbly ask that you consider our petition to extend the B4 district to our property. And if I didn't also say this, probably the most important point, all the properties around us are B4. This is not spot zoning, just doing this for Walden Savings Bank and Ned Law. You can look at a zoning map, everything around us is B4. We just happen to get OP, and OP is going nowhere fast. So B4 will provide for orderly development of the property consistent with the existing and allowable uses of property around us, and also allow the town to recognize future ratables. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Derek. And
Thank
just so you know, that last point is a big reason why this was even put on the agenda, as opposed to holding off or waiting and having it be part of the whole comprehensive plan process, is that it isn't spot zoning. It's just very specific. It's putting it in line to other B4 locations which are neighboring that zone. And also, this is an important piece that's on this, I'll put in here. Office parks are still permitted in B4, so although this is going to be changed, every single use from where it's being changed for is still included in B4. So while the district is eliminated, the use is not. And that's something that I think is important. So what we're doing here is recognizing that long-standing institution in the community, Walden Savings Bank, who desperately wants to see a positive development, this gives them a little more flexibility to give them options to develop that property. So I think we can separate this, in my opinion, which is why we brought it to the board. And they've been waiting quite a long time. It's not their fault.
35 years.
You know, the transition has been made the way it is. So wanted to get your guys' feedback.
Somebody else have a question besides me?
I think we all took a walk.
Yeah, we all did a walkthrough.
I've lived in Montgomery for 45 years. I never knew it was there, believe it or not.
Me neither.
Went to the top of it's the most gorgeous piece of property in the town of Montgomery. And I've been through all the parks. It would be great and I'm looking at these additional uses for B4, and as long as we don't put any warehouses up there.
We don't want a warehouse.
So any of these things in the B4 need a SEU permit also? Like, is that what?
A special use permit? I mean,
Is that what that is? It's on the end of every single one of them?
Does that mean right now it would need a special use? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if that's what's in B4 uses, I mean, every single one says.
As far as I know, they would need special permit, but they're
So
permitted.
what's permitted there without a special?
Well, it says it right there. If it doesn't have the ESCU, that's would be permitted there without a special use permit. So there's a
Doesn't
few,
what?
it doesn't have one at the end. So like this right here would need a special use, right? There's certain ones on there that wouldn't need.
Right,
There's very few, right? But the point is they couldn't have a chance if it wasn't zoned differently.
Just so the public is aware, we were given a list of some of the B4 uses. So hospital, schools, fire stations, public library, museums, nursery schools. There's a lot of really good, excellent uses here, like animal hospital, banking, bowling alley, which
Okay.
hotel.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Chris.
When did the banking regulations change, or did they, that would say that they don't want banks to actively
They've
market
always been
property?
there. That's just a banking kind of standard about banks really aren't in the business of of holding onto property, that they're not developing for the purpose of a branch. When we take property back as REO, a foreclosure, they want us to move it, so, and it goes the same with our property. It hasn't changed, and every time I have a regulatory exam, I show the momentum of what we've been doing over the 35 years. One of the people that has it currently listed, we've changed agents. When I said, oh, it's not moving because maybe we had the wrong real estate agents, we've lowered the price from 2.5 to 999. Just finished an exam this week, and I had to show all this activity that we're trying, we've tried to show it, so we're not in the doghouse because we are showing forward motion. They see all the efforts we've tried to do to actively sell it. We just have had absolutely no movement because it's OP, so.
So why the movement now to change it when we're in the
Because-
middle of looking at our comprehensive plan and
This
updating the
isn't,
zone?
You know,
this
it's not
isn't,
new.
this is not new.
That's what I was
This
trying to say.
goes back before me. I've been the president for 9 years. Our board has been trying this for years. We've lowered the prices. We've talked to the Bruder.
You tried changing the zone?
Not this particular.
So last year, this was submitted last year, that's the whole point.
Last spring.
Right, in fairness to them, it's not something that was brought
In
up
fairness
recently.
to them, it was submitted by them and never brought to the board.
Correct.
Yeah, the others, just for this grid that you have, the SP just stands for site plan, those are permitted uses.
The SEU is,
SEU is special use permit.
Right.
Basically, a special use permit, things on here in the B4 that are permitted uses, obviously.
right,
The
yeah.
Are you-
bowling alley, office and personal service shops like barber shops, beauty parlors, professional studios, repair shops for appliances. You could put a restaurant there just as long as you have an approved site plan, it's a permitted use. A tavern, vocational school, anything you see on here with an SP is a permitted use within that zone. Anything that's got the SEU, it needs a special use permit.
Right.
But it's.
Are you marketing it as one piece, or are you going to
Currently,
subdivide it?
currently there's about 25 acres, that's one piece at 999,000, and then there's 2 acres right at the very bottom. We wanna
Right,
keep,
2 acres.
yeah, we wanna keep the very front Hope Forever green because it just shows the beautiful monument sign in the bank, and our board wants to keep that, not have something right at the corner. But a little further down 208, there is another separate lot.
All right, thank you. I was just gonna ask Will something, but, he walked out.
Hey, Will.
Be right there.
Yep.
Is that part of this today or no?
Before I ask Will that question,
I just had a quick question for engineer, sorry.
all right, no problem. So my question is, if we wanted to move forward, what would we do? Just set a public hearing?
Well,
for potential-
again, we will need to schedule a public hearing. Town board would declare itself a lead agency for secret purposes. I would have to get referred to the county under 239M,
Right.
the county planning department. And we'd also want to have the town planning board have a look at it as well.
Right,
So if you want to move forward with that, the board can discuss that.
okay. Would anyone like to make that motion?
Your meeting's in March?
Yes, the first Thursday in March.
So that would be the public hearing?
Does that give you,
Enough?
All right, we got to get it to the county. And
For
the county's got
30
30
days.
days.
so your meetings in March are March 5th and March 19th?
Oh, so because it's 28 days in February, you're right. 29?
Actually, a week.
Yeah. It's leap year.
So that's just under 30 days.
Well, you can schedule the public hearing, and it's entirely possible that the
Oh,
county
you
will.
don't have to.
Ah, right, we'll get it back in time.
Once we, deal with the county. So it's up to the board.
All right, so what would the motion be so that our clerk could have it?
Has the applicant submitted an EAF on this?
I think so,
Yes.
I think I have a copy of them.
I have
Did
one
you not
for the-
get it?
I have one for the water and sewer portion, I don't know if I have one
For the zoning?
it may be, Tara, do you have it?
Do you want it?
I have what
For
you.
the zone change?
I think so.
I may have, because that has to also go to the county.
Don't mind, it's not, there's more papers behind it, but changes zoning for tax lines parcels for
Mhm.
margin.
Got it, Will?
Okay, so we did a full EAF.
And it's gonna be less
Well, no, I'm just,
Okay.
I just wanna make sure it's.
Thank you for standing.
Oh,
and
yeah,
being
if they
patient.
still stand or?
Does anyone have any more questions for Derek? Okay, thank you.
It's up to you.
Alright, you got an EAF here, so you can go ahead and schedule the public hearing.
All right, would anyone like to make that motion?
Second meeting in
I'll
March?
make
or-
No, this would be for March, fifth,
First
Thursday,
meeting.
March fifth,
Do we-
at 7 p.m. Oh, that's, on the 20th, that's the 20th, February.
Okay, just making sure it wasn't
Yeah,
the same night.
I'm on it.
Okay, so,
I'll second that.
Who made the motion?
hold on,
Ron.
hold on, we have to, within the motion,
Yeah.
there has to be a few things, we're gonna set the public hearing.
You got this?
Number one, the town board needs to deem the change of zone application complete, including the EAF, which Councilwoman Brown provided, so we have it, and the town board can review it. Number two, the town board has to declare itself as lead agency for secret purposes and classify the action. How many acres is this?
35, I think.
Derek, what was the acreage?
25.
25?
26, yeah.
Okay, so preliminarily classify the action as a type 1 action under part 617 of the seeker regulations.
But
What?
I don't know that this is complete.
You only do part 1, the agency
Oh, okay,
does
so I was
the
gonna
rest.
say, there are a whole lot of answers. After D, these are not answers.
Yes, on that form, if the project is of a certain nature, you skip a bunch of questions in part 1. I'll go through it and make sure that
I
it's.
think I would be a little nervous to
No,
say that
before
it's
we-
deemed complete until you look
Well,
through it and make sure
upon-
that it
But
is complete.
I actually did look at this, I was looking, I had 2 AAFs from them, one was the water extension, this one I do have. And there may be a couple of boxes that need to be changed when I was looking at this, because one of the boxes that said the town board was the only agency, I believe on that one you have, the county has to sign off on this too and look at it. So, what have I said so far?
Well, you said that it was deemed complete, and I don't know
The
that it is
form-
deemed complete.
The form has been submitted, whether the
Okay.
town board wants to make changes to the form, that's a separate issue, which we would do before the public hearing and before we did some other things. Karen, what do I have so far? I'm sorry.
The zoning application is complete, namely the EAF is deemed complete. 2, the town board has to declare itself lead agency for secret purposes, and it's classified as a type 1 action under seeker regulations.
Those are all one.
That's one motion, you just got a lot of
Yeah, we
things in
we
there.
can do it all in one motion.
Oh, and yeah, set the public hearing for March 5th, 2020 at 7
7
p.m.
p.m.
Rest soon
And
thereafter is
and
fine.
refer the application and the EAF to the Orange County Planning Department pursuant to General Municipal Law 239M for their review and comment to, what?
No, we're just making comments, keep going, Will, we're good, we're good.
And to pursuant to seeker, send out lead agency declaration notice to all interested and involved agencies, and post in the environmental notice bulletin. I think that'll cover it for now.
Thank you, Will. Do we throw in upon complete?
And also refer to the town planning board as well.
Okay. Upon final review by attorney? Is that?
Fine.
Okay, we'll put that in there too.
Keeping in mind whether that's gonna be me or somebody else based on my
Understood.
representation in certain aspects of the applicant's business.
Understood.
And the clerk is directed to publish all the appropriate notices.
All right.
That's the motion.
Ron, would you now like to make that
Can
motion?
you go over that motion?
Stop.
No. I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One recusal? Or she's not yet?
Abstain.
Abstain? Okay. All right, motion passed. Councilwoman, come on in.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you for being so patient. Can you please provide us with an update on the wastewater treatment plant? If we all remember, we had an emergency allocation a couple meetings ago. I gave a brief update that the work was being done, I believe, the day of the last meeting. Mike, can you give us a continued update, please?
On the inflow and infiltration monitoring?
Yes.
As our luck would have it, the AM Enterprises, the video inspection contractor, got out there within a couple days after getting the authorization, and that's right when inflow and infiltration subsided. So we did the camera work indicated potential sources of infiltration. There's nothing that was earth-shattering. And they recommended, rather than spend more of the town's money and another day out there, going further to wait until we maybe the spring melt, if we ever have any snow. But typically when we get some heavy rains, that are usually in March and April, schedule in advance to come out and finish the work. I think we conservatively allocated more than a day's worth of camera work. So the suggestion and recommendation by TAM, so that we have something to show for it, will be maybe, as long as the allocation the board made still stands, we'll monitor the weather in the coming month and a half, and have them come out when the metering shows INI has gone up, and it looks like we're going to have some heavy precipitation, which should show something.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, because we had inflow and infiltration issues, but our process didn't allow us to answer it immediately, to do the imaging, to catch it while we had our issue, we didn't really potentially see what could be the problem. So what you're suggesting is that we leave that authorization and the allocation that we made true, so that if it comes, you can respond in real time and find out what the problem is?
Yes.
Where is the wastewater treatment plant? Like, where is the,
help us in our application in terms of grant funding to make sure we upgrade our wastewater treatment plant. Thank you, Mike.
You got it.
All right, moving on to Ambulance Corps Task Force update. So Sherry Mellick, Councilman Mellick, and I have been part of a task force that included members of the Town of Montgomery Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Also Mike McNamee, who we were introduced to at our reorganization meeting, formerly of the Ambulance Corps, but also is part of the industry and is a Town of Montgomery resident who showed concerns and had some time available to help as well. Tom Waddell is on this task force. He is with RBT CPAs. He's an individual who helps with accounting of not just our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, but ambulance corps throughout the entire Hudson Valley region. We've been trying to also find a representative of Mobile Life, who we work with currently. I just want to give a quick overview. So a lot of us as board members, I know, and I thank you guys for really educating yourselves as well as I am on the facts and the definitions and what's going on. So just to give a quick synopsis to the public that are here and to all of you, this really comes down to an issue of funding on a variety of levels. Part of it is the market in terms of the industry and how it is that we can get qualified individuals interested in earning maybe not a great wage, but providing the services for ambulance corps that we need to have provided. The lack of interested individuals and availability for that industry is definitely hurting ambulance corps, not just here in Town of Montgomery, but all over the state of New York. And because of that, and because of the shortage of volunteers, a lot of ambulance corps are shifting to paid employees because they just can't get the number of volunteers. Because of all these things and so many more, there's some deficits. A big issue that I need everyone to just make sure we understand, I believe you all do, is right now our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps does not have the ability to respond to ALS, and that's Advanced Life Support Services. That's the serious cases. Right now, Mobile Life responds to those, and we respond to those as well. But that's a big portion of the revenue that our Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps does not receive, that if they had the ability to respond to those and they had the credentials, they would be able to. That is a long-term sustainable fix that I believe will help us maximize the amount of services we can provide from ambulance in the town of Montgomery, but also from a business standpoint, as the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps nonprofit, once they get to that threshold and can apply and serve the ALS need, they'll be able to become potentially more revenue neutral. So a lot of the financial shortfalls that you've seen on these bills that you're seeing that aren't able to get paid, I wanna make very clear, it's not strictly a mismanagement issue, it's not a lack of getting the resources to the right places, it's just the natural dynamic that exists, not just in the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, but ambulance corps throughout the entire state. And it's Medicare, it's Medicaid, it's the time that it takes for payments to get through to our ambulance corps and cash flow issues they have for that reason. But the big piece for the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps is the revenue they miss out on and not being February 1st, because these were of December 31st you had.
In regards to what, how much we have.
How much
in the
money you had
account?
in your account, correct?
Probably about $3,500
In which account? I know there were two.
with our checking account, and the other account just covers our payroll.
Correct. So at the end of December 31st, they had, I think it was about 10K total, if my numbers were correct. And you guys have paid out your payroll for the month of January, is that correct? So you
Yes.
have money coming in, but the money you have coming in, based on the services you're providing, is covering payroll. You guys have had to shift in order to cover the services and to save people's lives to paying full-time employees.
Right.
And because of that cost, you have to have that revenue that comes in, pay for that payroll, and there's a lot of bills that are here that just, you don't have the ability to pay, based on the financial statements you've given us, and you have laid out every single one of these specifically, what the amounts are, what's getting paid, we have them all here, so.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if Mobile Life does come, you pay them.
We pay them $365 to every Medicare
Right.
pool.
Correct. And if.
Because they can't both bill. So
Nope.
if both of them show up, they can't both bill. So now they are paying Mobile Life to come to a scene.
They can, hold on, sorry. So, to touch on that, we both can bill. Medicare only pays the transporting agency.
Right.
So if they pay us, then that person who has Medicare gets stuck with the $1,100 mobile life bill, whatever it may be, whatever was done. That's what happened. The reason we did the agreement with them was so the tax, people in the town wouldn't get stuck with that bill. So really it was done, I guess if you want to say, they take one for the team, like we basically did that so the taxpayers wouldn't get hurt with that bill, because it's a lot, especially because it's mostly elderly. If you're on Medicare, you're 65 and older, and they're fixed incomes as it is. So
Right.
basically, we did it. We laid on the sword basically so they wouldn't get those bills. We only get a little bit from it, but
So.
it also
so-
doesn't hurt them.
No, I agree. Is there something else you had, sorry?
No.
So another component of this is calls of service. So I think it was 2,300 calls of service a year, something around
About
that.
22, yeah.
2,200 calls for service. So a big portion of this is how many the town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps responds to, how many does Mobile Life respond to, and that really will allow us to project out, which is what we're trying to do now. Do you guys wanna speak on anything else? Looking to specifically take away and
Porter Bryan, we paid them.
half, sorry. The town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps, to answer Now, if we did draw up a contract, I imagine all
How many plumbing in that building for us? Yeah, no plumbing.
a little more advanced in the sense that when
Let's go back to the MLSS, because I'm not
ambulance with him
Yes,
and help
it's,
them.
it's not because they didn't show up. Where they are when they got canceled. There's just so much. $850. So we built 5 or 8 foot.
Child that my son was
it's just, right now, they have to cover their.
Just approve these requests, correct? Going to be able to work with their. This is, as per our discussion at the task been discussed for several months now.
Which was derived part of what precipitated this. But
What was the actual words? I'm sorry.
something like that are not
Vehicle's not in running condition, period.
Anything else before we move on? During the process with, you know, Correct.
Okay, it says draft in the
Yes.
application.
I know Kristen's got a bunch of things, but, do you guys have? Program was withdrawn, like Medline withdrew their pilot agreement.
The project was approved
change. Is there any other changes that actually
was what
currently will not suffer any consequences to its November 12, 2019 agency $141. I mean, that is a walk away from this project. That's so my point is, where are they going?
Guys are comfortable with.
Yes, I'm comfortable.
Where we stand?
And I think the letter should ask, we're gonna ask.
All right.
Well, you know what?
Sir, at all times, most welcome.
They're two separate resolutions.
Okay, the first Motion carried. Can I hear, motion?
I know, we don't have to, but we can do.
The House, and I apologize, I did not
Tara, for bringing it to our attention.
receiver of taxes as well. So
It sounds
supervisor.
When it was posted 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that goes through the director. New employees and